The desert evening in Sudan looked peaceful, almost like a picture drawn by calm hands. The sky was orange and gold, the wind moved softly, and the sand whispered tiny sounds as it slid across the ground. Anyone watching would think nothing bad could ever happen there. But deep inside this quiet land, something heavy was growing. Something dark, something dangerous. Pastor Arman, a gentle man from Iran, stood at the edge of a small Sudanese village. He had traveled very far, across deserts, across borders, through long nights and hot days, just so he could help people who felt forgotten. He carried no weapons, no important bags, not even fancy clothes. He carried only his tiny old Bible and a heart that refused to stop loving. He spoke kindly. He prayed for the sick. He hugged crying children. He encouraged people who felt hopeless. And little by little, people in the village began to smile again because of him. But while many hearts opened to him like flowers opening to the sun, some hearts remained hard like rocks. Some men in the village watched him with narrowed eyes. They did not like that he came from far away. They did not like that he spoke with calm joy. They did not like that people listened to him. For days, they followed him from far away. For nights, they whispered among themselves. And slowly, quietly, they made a plan. One night, when the sky was dark and the stars looked like tiny candles, an old woman named Mama Hawa came to Pastor Arman's small hut. Her hands shook as she pushed open the cloth at the door. "Pastor," she said, her voice shaking, "you must leave. You must leave tonight." Pastor Arman stood up slowly. "Why, Mama Hawa?" "I heard the men," she said with tears in her eyes. "I heard their voices. They are angry. They say they will come for you in the morning. They say it will be your last day here." Pastor Arman looked at her with soft sadness. Not fear, just sadness. "Thank you," he said gently. "But I cannot run. The people here still need hope. Hope cannot help you if you are gone," she cried. He smiled a quiet smile. "Hope does not come from me. It comes from God." Mama Hawa left with a hurting heart, and Pastor Arman knelt to pray. The desert night felt heavy, almost like it knew something terrible was coming. Even the wind seemed too afraid to blow. When morning arrived, the sun had barely touched the sky when angry footsteps filled the village. The men came fast, loud, and unkind. People peeked from their homes with fear in their eyes. They found Pastor Arman sitting under a tree, reading his Bible aloud to two small boys. "There he is," one of the men shouted. The boys ran away, scared. The men surrounded Pastor Arman, their faces tight with anger. He stood up slowly, keeping his calm like someone standing in the middle of a storm but choosing not to shake. "You will not speak here again," their leader said. "I came only to help," Arman replied softly. "We do not want your help," another man snapped. They grabbed his arms. They tied his hands tightly. They dragged him through the village as people watched silently, too afraid to speak. Even the goats and chickens moved away, as if they felt something wrong in the air. They took him outside the village, to a lonely field where the ground was dry and cracked. There was wood piled there, too neatly, too purposely. Pastor Arman looked at it. He understood. And still, he did not cry out. His eyes lifted to the sky as if searching for strength. "I am ready," he whispered quietly. Not because he wanted to die. Not because he had no fear. But because he trusted God even when the world looked dark. The men gathered around him. Their leader raised his hand to signal the others. The air grew strangely still. The ground felt different, as if the earth itself was waiting. And just as they prepared to end his life, something in the sky began to shift, slowly, quietly, powerfully. Something no one expected, something that would change everything. The men stood around Pastor Arman, their eyes sharp with anger, their breaths loud in the quiet air. But just as the leader opened his mouth to command the others, something strange happened, something so unusual that even the wind seemed surprised. The air changed. It became thicker, heavier, almost like invisible hands were pressing gently against everyone's skin. The men looked around, confused. One of them wiped his face and whispered, "Why does the air feel like this?" No one answered. Pastor Arman lifted his eyes slowly. The sky had taken on a soft glow, a color that was not normal for that time of morning. It wasn't bright like lightning. It wasn't dark like a storm. It was something in between, Something warm and alive, like a light that breathed. One of the men stepped back. "Do you see that?" he asked shakily. The leader tried to look confident, but his voice shook just a little. "It's nothing. Do your job." But inside, even he felt something was wrong, something he could not explain. His heart beat faster. His hands trembled ever so slightly. The light in the sky grew brighter. Not suddenly, not loudly, just slowly, gently, as if a curtain in heaven was being pulled open by invisible fingers. The glow spread across the field, touching the dry ground, the broken wood, and the faces of the men. It made their shadows stretch long behind them. Pastor Arman felt the light touch him too. It did not hurt. It felt like warmth filling his chest. It felt like a whisper telling him, "I am with you." The ropes around his wrists felt looser, almost like they were not tied by human hands anymore. But it didn't stop there. The wind rose again, but it was different this time. It didn't come fast or wild. It came like a soft wave, moving around Pastor Arman but pushing gently against the men. Their clothes fluttered. Dust lifted from the ground. Their steps shifted as if the wind was guiding their feet backwards. "Why is the wind against us?" one man cried. The leader tried to shout, but the wind caught his voice and made it thin, shaky, and small. He swallowed hard, realizing he had never felt so powerless. Still the light grew brighter. The field became silent again, but it wasn't an empty silence. It felt like the whole world had paused, watching, waiting. Even the birds in the distant trees did not make a sound. The sky held its breath. The earth stopped moving. Then, something formed inside the light. At first, it was only a soft shape, like a shadow. The men blinked and stared. The shape grew clearer, more defined, almost like someone was stepping forward from the glow. One man gasped, covering his mouth. Another fell to his knees. Another shook so hard he dropped the rope in his hands. The leader looked terrified for the first time. "What is that?" he whispered. But Pastor Arman knew. He felt it in the deepest part of his heart. His eyes grew wet, not from fear, but from overwhelming peace. He whispered softly, barely loud enough for the men to hear, "My Lord, you have come." The light moved closer, slow and calm. It did not rush. It did not force. It simply came forward like love walking into a room full of fear. Pastor Arman felt the ground beneath him grow warm, almost like a gentle hand was holding him up from below. His heart stopped trembling. His mind felt still. He felt safe in a way that no human protection could ever give. The men could not move. Fear held their legs, their voices, their thoughts. They stared at the glowing figure, unable to understand what they were seeing. Yet unable to look away. One of them stumbled back and whispered, "This is not a man. This is not a spirit. This is something holy." The leader's voice cracked. "Stop. Don't come any closer." But the light did not stop. It simply continued to grow gentle and warm, almost like a sunrise rising right in front of them. The ropes around Pastor Arman's hands loosened even more. The wind pushed the angry men farther away. The glow spread wider, brighter, stronger. And suddenly, everything changed. The men saw something that made them fall backwards in shock. Their faces lost all color. Their bodies shook like leaves in a storm. It was at this moment, the moment when fear turned into awe, the moment when hate collapsed into helplessness, that the miracle reached its beginning. What happened next was something not even Pastor Arman could have imagined. The light in the sky did not fade. It grew brighter, slowly, gently, like someone was pulling heaven closer to the earth. The air warmed, the ground softened, and even the shadows around Pastor Arman began to change shape, stretching and bending as if they were bowing. The men who had come to harm him could no longer pretend to be brave. Their bodies trembled, their eyes widened, their hearts pounded so loudly they could hear it in their own ears. It felt as if something far bigger than their anger was now standing in that field. Pastor Arman watched with calm eyes. He was no longer thinking about danger. He wasn't thinking about fear. His thoughts were filled with peace, deep peace, peace so strong it pushed away every worry. He felt held, protected, seen. The glowing figure in the light began to move. Not like a human walking, not with the steps of a person. It moved like light flowing, like love gliding across the air. Every time it came closer, the warm glow touched the field, spreading across the sand like a soft blanket. One of the men whispered, "Do you see that? Look at the ground." The leader looked down. The sand, dry and cracked just moments ago, looked somehow different, smoother, softer, as if the very earth felt the presence that was approaching. None of them had ever seen anything like it in their lives. Finally, the glowing figure approached Pastor Arman. It didn't speak with words. It didn't make sounds, but its presence spoke louder than any voice in the world. It was like peace had taken shape and stepped down from the sky. Pastor Arman felt tears gather in his eyes. Not tears of fear, not tears of pain, but tears of wonder. He whispered softly, "Lord, I trust you." The ropes around his hands, which had been so tight they hurt, suddenly loosened even more. They didn't break. They didn't fall. They simply softened, as if the knots had grown tired and decided to give up. His hands slipped out without struggle. The men gasped. How did he free himself? One of them shouted, but Arman hadn't moved. He hadn't pulled. He hadn't twisted. The ropes had released him on their own. At that moment, the wind blew again, but this time it felt like a soft breath, cool, refreshing, gentle. It circled Pastor Arman, lifting the edges of his clothes, brushing through his hair. He closed his eyes and felt a warmth settle on his shoulders, like someone placing a comforting hand there. The men backed away even farther. Their leader raised his hands as if to protect himself from something he could not see clearly but could feel deeply. One man fell to the ground, trembling. "This is holy. We must leave. We should not be here." But the leader shook his head, though his voice was no longer strong. "No, we must understand what is happening." Yet even he could barely stand. His legs shook. His face drained of color. His anger had disappeared completely, washed away like dust in the rain. The glowing figure's light reached him too. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't punishing. It simply touched him the same way it touched everyone else. Kindly, gently, like a soft hand brushing a frightened face. The leader's breath caught in his throat. He felt his heart soften, something he didn't expect. All the anger he carried, all the hardness in his chest, all the pride he hid behind melted in just a second. Tears he had never shown in public filled his eyes, surprising even himself. He whispered, barely hearing his own voice, "Why do I feel peace, when I came with hate?" Pastor Arman heard him and looked up. His eyes were kind. "Because love is stronger than anger," he said softly. "Stronger than fear, stronger than anything." The leader covered his face, overwhelmed. He had never felt such warmth inside himself. It wasn't just light on the outside. It was light touching his heart. The glowing figure moved again, turning slightly as if looking at the men. They couldn't see a clear face, but they felt something powerful and gentle at the same time. It felt like forgiveness without words, like compassion without speech. The men had no idea what to do. Some knelt, some cried, some simply stared. For the first time in their lives, they felt small, but not in a bad way. They felt like they were standing in front of something pure. And just when it seemed the miracle had reached its height, something even greater began to unfold. The wind grew softer. The light deepened. The air hummed with warmth. And the men felt a presence moving through the field, gentle, soft, powerful, holy. They knew, all of them knew, something divine was happening right before their eyes. The world around them was changing. The sky was watching. The earth was listening. And the miracle was only beginning. The field had never felt so alive. It was still the same place. The same sand, the same cracked ground, the same dry air, but now it felt like heaven had quietly stepped onto the earth. Something deep, something invisible, something holy moved through the space with every breath of wind. None of the men spoke. None of them even dared to move. They were frozen in a mix of fear and awe, staring at the glowing presence that stood near Pastor Arman. The light moved like a gentle wave, touching everything around it. Whenever it passed over a stone, the stone seemed softer. Whenever it touched the air felt warmer. The men felt it inside their hearts too. Some of them shook uncontrollably. Some cried without meaning to. Some covered their faces as if the light was too strong for their souls. Pastor Arman stood at the center of it all. His hands were free now, completely free, and he lifted them slowly, like someone receiving a gift he never expected but always hoped for. Tears rolled down his cheeks, but his face was full of peace. A peace that did not come from the earth. A peace that felt like it came from the heart of God himself. The glowing figure did not speak with a voice, yet every man there understood something. They felt something being said inside them, in a language made not of words but of truth. It was like the presence was asking each of them the same question. Why did you choose anger when love was waiting for you? The men felt the question deeply. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't accusing. It was gentle, like someone softly touching a sore wound, not to hurt it, but to heal it. The leader stepped forward, though his legs trembled so much he almost fell. His face looked different now, softer, almost like the face of someone who had just woken up from a bad dream and realized it was all wrong. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Only broken breaths, only tears he could not stop. Finally, he managed to whisper, We were wrong. His men turned to look at him, surprised. They had never heard him speak that softly. They had never seen him cry. But now he stood like a boy who had lost all his pride, all his anger, all his strength. Pastor Arman watched him kindly. His voice was soft, almost like a father speaking to a child who had made a mistake. You did not know, he said gently. But now you see. The leader looked at Pastor Arman with shaking eyes. Who protects you like this? What power is this? What light is this? Who stands with you in this field? And in that moment, the glowing presence brightened, not fiercely, not in a frightening way, but in a way that felt like the answer itself. Pastor Arman felt a warm strength fill him. He stepped one small step closer to the men, even though the ground still glowed under his feet. He whispered, It is Jesus. The name seemed to echo without sound. The wind moved through the field softly, almost like it repeated the name. The men felt a weight lift off them, like chains they didn't even know they were carrying had suddenly fallen away. The leader fell to his knees. He didn't plan to. His body simply gave up trying to stand before such peace. Forgive us, he whispered, his face bending toward the ground. The other men knelt too. Some pressed their hands together. Some covered their faces and cried. Some bowed low, not because they were forced, not because they feared punishment, but because the presence in the light made their hearts feel small, clean, and honest. The glowing figure moved again, passing its warm light over the men. Each time the glow touched them, their hearts softened even more. Anger melted out of them like melting ice. Fear slipped away like a bird leaving a cage. Even the dryness inside their souls felt watered. Pastor Arman knelt too, not in fear, but in deep gratitude. He felt the light fill him with a warmth so strong it made him breathless. He felt held, protected, loved. It was a love that had followed him from Iran to Sudan, through danger, through threats, and now through a miracle. The field was silent again. But it was not the heavy, frightening silence from earlier. This silence was peaceful, soft, warm, gentle. A silence full of hope. The leader lifted his head slowly. His face was wet with tears. His eyes were red, but something inside him had changed forever. We wanted to destroy you, he said, voice shaking, but instead, something has changed us. Pastor Arman nodded gently. That is what love does, he said. It changes hearts. The glowing figure stood still for a moment, as if giving them time to breathe, time to understand, time to heal. Then, slowly, the light began to shift. It became brighter for one last moment, as bright as morning sunlight, but still gentle to look at. The wind moved softly around them one more time. The ground warmed under their feet. And then, something beautiful happened. The light began to rise. Slowly. Quietly. Peacefully. It lifted upward, toward the sky, carrying its warmth with it. The men watched with trembling hearts, their eyes wide and shining. Pastor Arman watched too, feeling love so deep he could hardly breathe. The glowing presence rose higher, and higher, and higher, until it became part of the sky again, and the field was left glowing with a soft warmth, like the memory of heaven still rested there. But the miracle was not finished. Something even more unexpected was about to happen, something that would change not only the men, but the whole village. For a long moment, the men did not move. They simply stared at the sky where the glowing presence had risen, their hearts still beating fast, their minds struggling to understand what had happened. The field felt different now. The air was lighter. The fear that once filled the place had vanished completely, replaced by a quiet kindness that seemed to rest on the wind. Pastor Arman stood slowly, still feeling the warmth in his chest. His legs felt weak, not from fear, but from the weight of what he had just witnessed. He looked at the men kneeling around him. They were not the same people who had dragged him here. Their eyes were soft now. Their faces were humble. Their hearts were open in a way they had never been before. The leader wiped his face with trembling hands. When he finally stood, he did so slowly, like someone learning to walk again. He looked at Pastor Arman with deep shame and deep wonder. "We came here with hate," he said quietly. "But we leave with something we do not understand." Pastor Arman smiled gently. "You do not need to understand everything," he said softly. "Sometimes your heart understands before your mind does." The leader nodded, his eyes glistening with tears he no longer tried to hide. He looked down at the ground, ashamed. "We wanted to hurt you," he whispered. "We thought we were doing something right. But now, after what we saw, I feel like my heart has been washed." The wind brushed past them lightly, almost as if agreeing with his words. One of the younger men stood up. His voice shook as he spoke. "Pastor, why did the light come? Why did it protect you?" Pastor Arman looked up at the sky, his eyes peaceful. "Love protects," he answered quietly. "And when someone belongs to God, God does not leave them alone." The men listened quietly, their hearts soft as sand smoothed by the tide. After a while, they walked back toward the village with Pastor Arman. They didn't force him to walk ahead. They walked beside him, slowly, respectfully, almost protectively. It was strange for the villagers to see. When the people peeked through their doors, they gasped and whispered to each other. Even the goats and chickens moved aside as the unusual group passed through. Mama Hawa, the old woman who had warned Pastor Arman, hurried forward when she saw him. Tears poured from her eyes as she grabbed his hands. "You are alive," she cried. "Oh, thank God, you are alive." Pastor Arman squeezed her hands gently. "God was with me," he said softly. The leader stepped forward, his head bowed. "Mother, we wronged this man," he said quietly. "We meant to harm him. But something holy stopped us." The villagers gasped. Some covered their mouths. Some backed away in shock. Some came closer, curious. Mama Hawa stared at the leader. "You," she asked. "You finally see?" He nodded. "We saw a light no human could make. We felt peace no man could create. None of us can deny what happened." The younger men behind him lowered their heads, each feeling the same mixture of shame and awe. The villagers whispered among themselves, wondering if this miracle would change the men forever, or if it was only a moment of fear. But as minutes passed, as people watched their faces, as they listened to their voices, it became clear. The change was real. The leader walked toward Pastor Arman and knelt before him, surprising the entire village. "I do not ask for your forgiveness because I deserve it," he said softly. "I ask because I want my heart to be new." Pastor Arman placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Forgiveness is already yours," he said. "Because God forgave you even before you asked." The leader sobbed softly, overwhelmed. More villagers came out of their homes. Children approached slowly, hiding behind their mother's clothing, peeking at Pastor Arman with wide eyes. One little boy tugged on the pastor's sleeve. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "Did the light come from heaven?" Pastor Arman bent down, smiling tenderly. "Yes," he whispered. "Heaven came to help us." The boy's eyes grew wide with wonder. He ran to tell the others, his small feet kicking up sand as he shouted, "Heaven came! Heaven came!" The entire village gathered around Pastor Arman and the men who had changed. No one argued, no one fought, no one shouted. It was as if the light had left a piece of itself inside every heart in that place. As the sun lowered in the sky and the golden glow returned to the village, something beautiful happened. The leader spoke again, but this time his voice held no anger, no pride, no hardness. "Pastor," he said quietly, "teach us. Teach us about the one who protected you. Teach us about the love that changed us." Pastor Arman felt tears rise again, but they were tears of joy this time. He nodded slowly. "I will," he said. "I will teach you all." That evening, under the same sky where the miracle had happened, the entire village gathered. Even the men who once held hatred in their hearts sat close, listening with open minds. Children leaned against their mothers. Old men rested on walking sticks. The wind moved softly around them, as if it too were listening. Pastor Arman opened his little Bible, and for the first time in that village's history, the men who once tried to silence him were now the ones listening the closest. What began as a moment of danger had become a moment of transformation. What began with hate ended with hearts changed forever, and the memory of the light stayed with them, warming their souls long after the miracle was gone. Summary: in Sudan, an Iranian pastor named Arman traveled far from home to help people, pray with them, and share kindness. Even though life in Sudan was hard and dangerous, he stayed calm and trusted God. One night, a group of men captured him because they did not like his message of peace. They tried to harm him by setting a fire near him, hoping fear would make him stop what he believed. But as the flames rose close, something impossible happened. The fire did not hurt him. Instead, a strong, peaceful wind surrounded him, and he felt protected. The men who had tried to harm him were shocked and afraid. They had never seen anything like it. Arman walked out of the danger safely, calm and unharmed, saying that Jesus had saved him. Moral lesson: courage comes from standing for what is right. Even when Arman was alone, he stayed brave because his heart was strong. Kindness and faith can shine even in dark places. He chose love over fear, and that changed everything. Miracles can happen when hope is not lost. Arman believed he was not alone, and that faith gave him protection. Hurting others is never the answer. The men learned that harming someone innocent only brings fear, not power. Light always wins over darkness. No matter how big the danger looked, goodness was stronger. The end.